Hello, fellow readers and booktubers. It is Poetry Thursday, and today I would like to read some poems by Edwin Arlington Robinson, who I would guess many of you have probably never heard of before. I had never heard of him up until about maybe 3 weeks ago, and since then I have just become enamored of his poetry and his vision. He's a remarkable poet. There was a time early in the 20th century when he was reckoned among the greats. He was considered to be one of the great American poets. I think he should still be right up there with Whitman and Dickinson and Sandburg and all the rest. He did win 3 Pulitzers for his poetry, one in 1922 and then another in 1924 and 1928. He had been nominated 4 times for the Nobel in Literature. He was also the favorite poet of President Theodore Roosevelt, although Roosevelt's political enemies used this as a way of demonstrating that Roosevelt was too stupid to be president. That's a political issue. At any rate, and he is regarded as the first of the modern poets. Okay? And he influenced a lot of modern poetry, particularly Robert Frost. This guy right here, Edwin Arlington Robinson. He's not exactly obscure. If you look him up online, you'll see things about him. There are websites all about his poetry, and they have posted, those who admire his work have posted his poems. He is, the fact that I came upon him so late in my life is, I think, more of a testimony to the benefits of going to a bookstore or a library instead of looking up things online. I was just wandering through the stacks, and there was this poet. Never heard of him before. I read 1 or 2 of the poems out of that book, and I just had to have it. He's really wonderful. I think the reason maybe he's not remembered as well as he should be is he's writing his poetry at a time when, in American literature at least, poetry was changing pretty dramatically. Robinson's poems have that, they're all about rhythm and meter. They rhyme, there's a rhyme scheme. His poems are about other things and other people. But he's writing these poems at the same time that T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound and Gertrude Stein and so many others are blowing that up. Free verse is the call, the rallying cry of poets everywhere at that time, and the poems are not about other people, they're all about me, they're all about the I. And so Robinson represents that older kind of poetry in what many people would have seen as in its death throes. However, when you read Robinson's poems, even though the format is, I guess you would call it genteel or old-fashioned, the theme of his poems is very modern, almost postmodern. There's a darkness to them. There's an eeriness to them. There's something very troubling about them. And the characters, his poems are about these fictional characters many of them live in this New England town called Tilbury, which is a made-up place. He's writing short stories, but in verse form. And they're very effective, but they're very dark. Tilbury, is supposed to be in New England somewhere, so that kind of puts a context to these poems. Think, Washington Irving. Think The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. The characters in his poems, often they're filled with regret, or they find themselves in these horrible predicaments. There's never any why to it, though. You never find out exactly how they got into the situation they're in. They're just there. And their reaction to the situation is supposed to, I think, be revealing of what their character is, okay? And but they're often victims of this slow, inexorable grinding of fate that gets them to the end of the poem. But there's never any explanation. There's really never any why. Robinson himself is absent from these poems. He's not in there. He's an observer. He's telling you this story. Some of them are almost morality plays in a strange way. Now, let me modify that statement. There is no moral to these. These are just things happening to people, often very bad things. And I laugh at that, too, because there is a certain gallows humor to some of these. There's often an inflection point at the end that twists the entire poem around, and you get the surprised ending that causes you at first to laugh and then to be suddenly concerned about the character. Robinson is like Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft combined, but with a dash of humor. He does have some humor in these poems. You might have to work hard to find it. If you don't appreciate gallows humor, it's probably going to be lost on you, but it's there nonetheless. And some of these poems have almost a sing-song quality to them, as if you can imagine a group of children holding hands in a big circle, dancing around, singing one of his poems, kind of like Ring Around the Rosie. But if you were to, you'd think that was very cute, but if you were to listen to what they were actually saying, you would recoil in horror, as if they were trying to summon something evil from the depths. I don't want to overstate that too much. Some of the poems are actually quite sweet and very sentimental, but there's always this sense of loss. Something has happened, something has gone away and can never come back again. But the writing is just as charming as can be, and he just pulls you in, even though it's this old style of writing. It works. He makes it work, and it's beautiful. So that's my introduction. I'm going to read some of his poems to you now to get a sense of what I'm talking about. There were so many poems. This is Robinson's selected poems. This is the Penguin edition. Robert Faggen is the guy who edited this and wrote the introduction to it. But I was going through it. I was just, putting little markers by all the poems that I liked, and pretty soon it seemed like I had checked about half of them in this collection. So I'm not going to read them all to you right now. I may return to him next Thursday for the next Poetry Thursday, because he's that quotable and he's that interesting a poet. But for today, I thought I'd give you a taste, and I want to begin with what I think is his most famous poem. When I did a little research on Robinson, this was the poem that was most often quoted. And the name of the poem is Richard Cory. And again, these are fictional characters. That he's telling you the story of these fictional characters. Richard Cory. Whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from sole to crown, clean-favored and imperially slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked. But still he fluttered pulses when he said, "Good morning," and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything, to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked and waited for the light, and went without the meat and cursed the bread. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. That's Robinson. There's the inflection point. There's no explanation for why he did this. You can put an explanation on it, or the idea that people would admire this Richard Cory because of his wealth and his sophistication, but in reality there was some horrible demon lurking inside of him that he had to kill by killing himself. There's just a lot of different ways about this. And again, to me that's an example of gallows humor. It's kind of funny at the end because you're so shocked by what happens. Again, the parallels, the similarities between Robinson and other American voices in literature and even in art. I would think about Edward Gorey, or I would think about Charles Addams, the guy who wrote the single-panel cartoons in the New Yorker that eventually became the Addams Family. It's kind of that too. That's in there too. I can almost imagine Gomez and Morticia Addams reading that poem as a bedtime story for their children and then cackling at the end of it. But that's one of his more famous poems, Richard Cory. Let me read another one to you. Let's see here. Here's one that really speaks to the idea of a sense of loss. And by the way, some of these poems I was thinking would be great to read around Halloween in the fall, but I couldn't wait. I was so excited by these, I wanted to share them with you right away. Maybe I'll return to them in the fall. This poem in particular, it's called The Pity of the Leaves. Vengeful across the cold November moors, loud with ancestral shame, there came the bleak, sad wind that shrieked and answered with a shriek, reverberant through lonely corridors. The old man heard it, and he heard perforce words out of lips that were no more to speak, words of the past that shook the old man's cheek like dead, remembered footsteps on old floors. And then there were the leaves that plagued him so, the brown, thin leaves that on the stones outside skipped with a freezing whisper. Now and then they stopped and stayed there just to let him know how dead they were. But if the old man cried, they fluttered off like withered souls of men. Now that's a poem that's eerie. It's certainly autumnal. It's frightening, but it's also very, very sad. It's about an old man he's the last survivor of a group of friends that are all now long gone. And it's almost as if nature were mocking him. Again, a sad poem. Again, this is Edwin Arlington Robinson. I want to conclude with two more poems. One of these has that kind of sing-song quality to it. You can imagine children singing this song. And the other one is, well, we'll get to that in a minute. And again, this is about a fictional character named John Evereldown. Where are you going tonight, tonight? Where are you going, John Evereldown? There's never the sign of a star in sight, nor a lamp that's nearer than Tilbury Town. Why do you stare as a dead man might? Where are you pointing away from the light? And where are you going tonight, tonight? Where are you going, John Evereldown? Right through the forest where none can see. That's where I'm going, to Tilbury Town. The men are asleep or awake maybe, but the women are calling John Evereldown. Ever and ever they call for me. And while they call, can a man be free? So right through the forest where none can see, that's where I'm going, to Tilbury Town. But why are you going so late, so late? Why are you going, John Evereldown? Through, though the road be smooth and the way be straight, there are 2 long leagues to Tilbury Town. Come in by the fire, old man, and wait. Why do you chatter out there by the gate? And why are you going so late, so late? Why are you going, John Evereldown? I follow the women wherever they call. That's why I'm going to Tilbury Town. God knows if I pray to be done with it all, but God is no friend of John Evereldown. So the clouds may come and the rains may fall, but the shadows may creep and the dead men crawl. But I follow the women wherever they call, and that's why I'm going to Tilbury Town. I've read that poem a number of times, and every time it gives me the creeps. This John Evereldown, what is he? He almost seems like a serial killer. The women are calling him and he can't resist. But you have to wonder, are they really calling him, or is he just imagining this? And he has to go out late at night through the woods to get to Tilbury Town, to where the women are summoning him. But I don't think they're really summoning him. There's something very dark in this. And that sing-song quality, that chorus-like thing, where are you going tonight, tonight? Where are you going, John Evereldown? That doesn't send a shiver down your spine. I don't know what does. So with that one, I'd like to read one last poem in which John Evereldown shows up again, in a surprising way, though. This poem is called The Tavern. Whenever I go by there nowadays and look at the rank weeds and the strange grass, the torn blue curtains and the broken glass, I seem to be afraid of the old place, and sometimes stiffen up and down my face for all the world as if I saw a ghost of old Ham Amory, the murdered host, with his dead eyes turned on me all aglaze. The tavern has a story, but no man can tell what it is. We only know that once, long after midnight, years ago, a stranger galloped up from Tilbury Town, who brushed and scared and all but overran the skirt-crazed reprobate John Evereldown. Again, clearly something awful has happened in this tavern, and it happened long ago. The murdered host, Ham Amory, and then the crazed reprobate, John Evereldown, are killed, or one kills the other, or they both killed each other. It's really hard to know, but it's the idea of a stranger galloping up to the tavern, and then everything dies or is murdered. Very strange, disturbing stuff, and beautifully written. This is Edwin Arlington Robinson. I think I will return to him next Thursday for the next Poetry Thursday. And I'll read some of the poems that aren't quite as dark and bleak. But I think even in these bleak ones, it's like Edgar Allan Poe. It stirs your imagination, even in some very dark places. But it's done so well that you can't help but admire this guy. So that's what I have for you on this Thursday, Poetry Thursday. And I'll talk to you all again later, very soon, I hope.